The evening was calm, the kind of quiet that made the small steakhouse seem even cozier. A single father, a veteran who had spent years in service, walked inside, tired but content to have a night just for himself. He had worked long hours that day, his body sore from physical labor, his mind still carrying the echo of memories that never really left him. Life at home was busy, filled with the laughter and occasional chaos of his child. But tonight, he wanted a simple meal and a chance to sit quietly. He chose a table near the corner, where he could see the entire restaurant without being too noticeable. He ordered his usual, a steak cooked medium, with a side of vegetables and a glass of water. As he waited, he let his eyes wander. The restaurant was busy, but not crowded. Families chatted softly, couples laughed quietly, and servers moved with practiced ease between tables. The veteran had learned to notice small things, habits formed during his years in service. He observed the way people interacted, how their eyes moved, how hands fidgeted. Most would think he was simply people watching, but for him, it was instinct. It had become a habit he could not switch off, even in moments meant for peace. Across the room, a man sat at a table with two colleagues. Well-dressed, confident, and smiling, he laughed occasionally, his presence commanding respect without trying. The veteran recognized the man immediately, though he had never met him personally. It was the police chief of the town, someone known for his service, for maintaining law and order, and for being both respected and feared in the right measure. The veteran did not feel admiration or envy. He simply acknowledged it with the quiet observation of someone who had learned to read people quickly. As the veteran waited for his meal, he began noticing small details others might not catch. A man at a nearby table kept glancing around nervously, his hand twitching as if ready to grab something. Another person shifted in their seat, eyes scanning the room in a way that seemed cautious, almost fearful. The veteran's instincts stirred, a sense that something was off. It was subtle, the kind of tension that most people missed, but he felt it as clearly as a pulse. He reminded himself to stay calm. He wasn't here to get involved, not yet. But he also knew that his training never really took a break. The aroma of grilled meat reached his table, and the veteran focused on his meal. But even as he ate, his mind kept track of the movements around him. The nervous glances continued. There was a faint scratching sound coming from a corner, almost imperceptible. He tilted his head slightly, noticing the way a man's hand lingered near the waistband of his jacket. It could be nothing, a harmless habit, but his instincts whispered otherwise. Memories from his service days came back, the subtle cues that indicated danger, the split-second decisions that could save lives or cost them. He had learned to trust those instincts. The restaurant hummed with normal activity. A child giggled at the table behind him. A couple clinked their glasses together softly. The veteran felt the comfort in normalcy, but the undercurrent of tension never fully left his mind. He kept watching, silent and alert. His gaze shifted back to the police chief. The man seemed relaxed, but there was an unspoken alertness in his posture. Years of experience had taught the chief to notice the environment around him, even in social settings. The veteran noticed the subtle signals, the way the chief's eyes scanned the room briefly, the slight tightening of his jaw. Both men, trained in their own ways, were unaware of each other's awareness, just yet as he took another bite of his steak. The veteran's mind replayed the signs he had noticed. His training kicked in naturally, without conscious thought. He observed body language, subtle movements, and unspoken signals. The man with the twitching hand was now looking more directly at the chief's table, a flash of calculation in his eyes. The veteran's stomach tightened slightly, a warning signal from years of experience. He reminded himself not to overreact, to stay calm, to gather more information. Panic could make any situation worse, and he had learned that lesson well. He finished his meal slowly, each bite deliberate. The world around him continued its casual rhythm, unaware of the tension building just below the surface. Servers moved past with trays of food, the sounds of clinking plates and soft conversations filling the air. The veteran remained still, a quiet observer in the corner, blending into the background. His child's laughter at home seemed a world away, yet the thought of protecting innocence stayed with him. It always did. That sense of duty, ingrained from years of service, extended beyond the battlefield and into any place where danger could arise. The man at the nearby table shifted again, this time more noticeably. His hand brushed against something concealed under his jacket, and his eyes darted toward the police chief. The veteran's attention sharpened. He had seen this look before, in situations that were tense and unpredictable. He did not move yet, not wanting to draw attention, but he remained ready. Each muscle in his body was alert, every sense tuned to the possibility of sudden action. He remembered a phrase from his training, drilled into him over and over: observe, decide, act. He had no idea what would happen next, but he was prepared to follow that rule if needed. The police chief, meanwhile, continued his meal, unaware of the silent calculation happening nearby. The veteran noticed the chief's hand resting lightly on the table, fingers twitching slightly as if ready to react to a signal. Years of experience had made the chief cautious, even in casual settings. The veteran appreciated the subtlety, recognizing a trained mind at work. He did not approach immediately, choosing instead to wait for confirmation, to understand the full picture before making any move. Experience had taught him that hesitation in the wrong moment could be fatal. Minutes passed, each one stretching longer than the last. The nervous man's movements became more deliberate, almost rehearsed. He adjusted his posture, glanced around with a quick, calculating eye, and shifted closer to the chief's table. The veteran's instincts flared. He quietly finished his drink, setting the glass down with deliberate calm. He was ready to act if necessary, but knew the value of patience. Timing, he reminded himself, was everything. The world around them remained oblivious. Laughter, conversation, and the occasional clatter of a plate continued to fill the air. No one noticed the silent tension growing in the corner of the room. The veteran's eyes never left the suspicious man or the police chief. He calculated distances, observed hand placement, and measured the potential for intervention. Each observation added to a mental map of the situation, a scenario playing out in his mind with multiple possible outcomes. He was aware of the risks, but his years of training had taught him that awareness and preparation could make all the difference. Finally, the veteran took a deep breath, letting the calm surface mask the readiness beneath. He reminded himself that he was not a hero seeking recognition. He was a father, a veteran, and someone who had seen what could happen when ordinary moments turned dangerous. Protecting others was instinct, a responsibility ingrained into him long before he walked into the steakhouse that evening. He adjusted his posture, preparing mentally for the possibility of action, while still appearing as nothing more than a quiet diner enjoying his meal. The tension, though invisible to others, was as real as the air they all breathed. And in that quiet moment, a single father veteran sat ready, unaware that the night was about to demand more than he had ever imagined. The veteran sat in his corner, finishing the last bites at his meal, but his mind never left the nervous man and the police chief. Every small movement caught his trained eyes. The man shifted in his chair again, fingers brushing against something hidden beneath his jacket. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but the veteran noticed instantly. His heart rate didn't spike, though. He had learned to keep calm, even when danger lurked close. His mind worked quietly, analyzing the situation, weighing possibilities, and preparing for what might come next. He remembered his years in the service, the countless drills and real missions where he had to make split-second decisions. The same principles applied here, even though it wasn't a battlefield in the traditional sense. He stayed seated, acting natural, blending in, but mentally he was already mapping out the space around him. The positions of the tables, the exits, the patrons, even the layout of the kitchen, all of it mattered. Every variable could affect what happened next. He had trained to anticipate, to react before chaos erupted, and now those lessons were more relevant than ever. The man's gaze moved again, lingering briefly on the chief before darting around the room. The veteran noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders and the way his eyes flicked repeatedly to the entrance and back. He was preparing for something. The veteran's instincts screamed that this was serious, but he reminded himself to stay quiet, to observe, to wait for a clear signal before intervening. He couldn't afford a mistake. The safety of everyone in the restaurant, including the police chief, depended on careful timing. As he sipped water, the veteran's mind replayed scenarios. What if the man acted suddenly? How could he intervene without causing panic or putting civilians at risk? His thoughts were deliberate, methodical. He ran through every possible reaction, every escape route, and every way to protect the chief. He knew he had to remain calm, to act only when the moment was right. That patience had saved lives before, and he trusted it would do so again. The police chief ate slowly, unaware of the growing danger nearby. His presence commanded attention, even in subtle ways. The veteran noted the chief's posture, the way he adjusted slightly in his seat, always ready. Years of training and experience had made the chief alert without making it obvious. The veteran felt a quiet respect for him, recognizing a fellow professional who understood awareness and timing. Both men, trained differently, were now connected by the silent tension building in the room. The suspicious man shifted once more, this time more deliberately. He leaned slightly, his hands still concealed, eyes flicking to the chief. The veteran's instincts tightened like a coil. He finished his drink, placing the glass on the table gently, making sure not to draw attention. He subtly adjusted his position to have a clearer view without making anyone suspect. Each second counted. The nervous energy in the room was invisible to most, but for the veteran, it was palpable. A signal that the moment to act might be approaching. He remembered a lesson drilled into him during service. Never act too soon, but never hesitate when the moment is critical. He observed the people around the tables, noting who could be at risk if something happened suddenly. Families, couples, and servers, all unaware of the potential danger so close. His mind cataloged everyone's position, ready to anticipate the consequences of any sudden action. Protecting civilians was always the first priority. The man's behavior became more erratic, though still subtle enough that others wouldn't notice. He shifted his weight, fingers brushing the concealed object repeatedly. The veteran could see the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes scanned the room in sharp, quick movements. Each action confirmed what the veteran already suspected. The man was preparing for something, and it was dangerous. He remained seated but ready, every muscle coiled for action. He had learned that control was more important than brute force, patience more effective than haste. The veteran's thoughts briefly drifted to his child. That innocent, trusting presence at home reminded him why he could never ignore danger when he saw it. It wasn't about heroism or recognition. It was instinct, a commitment to protect others when no one else might. The restaurant around him remained calm, the normal sounds of conversation and clinking cutlery masking the tension that only he could sense. He was alone in his awareness, yet fully aware of the responsibility that awareness brought. The suspicious man shifted again, this time leaning slightly toward the police chief's table. His movement was careful, but deliberate, calculated. The veteran could see his intent clearly. He noted the subtle angle of the man's body, the way he adjusted his coat to keep the hand concealed, and the flicker in his eyes that betrayed focus and determination. This was the point where most people would panic or react without thinking. The veteran remained steady, analyzing, planning, and preparing to intervene if necessary. He would not act rashly. Timing was everything. He observed the chief again, noting how instinctively the man's hand hovered near the edge of the table, a subtle readiness that mirrored the veteran's own. The veteran felt a silent connection, a shared understanding of situational awareness and readiness, even though they were strangers. Both men, trained in vigilance, were now unconsciously aligned, each unaware of how crucial their combined awareness might soon become dot as the minutes stretched. The veteran noticed something else. The nervous man's breathing was shallow, quickening slightly, betraying a rising anxiety. Small details, imperceptible to most, told the veteran everything he needed to know. The man was preparing for an action that could endanger others. He had to be ready, patient, and precise. The veteran quietly scanned the rest of the restaurant again, mentally noting potential obstacles, escape routes, and the positions of everyone nearby. His body was calm, but his mind raced through possibilities, anticipating the moment when intervention would be required. That the atmosphere in the restaurant remained deceptively peaceful. A family laughed softly at a nearby table. A couple toasted each other, and servers moved between tables with practiced grace. No one noticed the silent storm brewing in the corner, the invisible countdown to a moment that could change everything. The veteran remained seated, blending in, ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. His instincts told him to stay patient, to observe, and to act only when necessary. He trusted that judgment, honed over years of service. The nervous man shifted once more, his eyes flicking repeatedly toward the police chief. The veteran felt a tightening in his chest, not from fear, but from anticipation. He had seen this kind of behavior before, during tense operations, where split-second timing meant the difference between safety and disaster. He prepared himself mentally, imagining every possible scenario, every potential outcome, and how best to neutralize the threat without causing harm to others. Time seemed to slow. The veteran finished his drink, placed the glass down gently, and subtly shifted to a better position, maintaining full view of the unfolding situation. Every detail mattered: the man's posture, the chief's hand placement, the positions of bystanders, the layout of the room. It was a quiet moment filled with anticipation, where patience and awareness would determine the outcome. He remained composed, alert, and ready. His mind returned briefly to his child, the thought grounding him. Protecting those who could not protect themselves was instinctual. He did not need recognition, only the ability to act when required. The restaurant's ordinary sounds continued to mask the silent tension in the corner. The veteran observed everything, ready to act at the exact right moment. This was not about heroism. It was about doing what needed to be done. And now, the moment to act was approaching faster than anyone realized. The veteran had watched closely as the nervous man in the corner of the restaurant shifted closer to the police chief's table. Each movement was precise, calculated, and intentional. The veteran's heart remained steady, his breathing calm, but his mind worked faster than ever. He had been trained to see threats before they fully revealed themselves, and now he knew the time to act was approaching. Every instinct in his body whispered that the situation was about to become dangerous. He remained seated, blending into the background, waiting for the perfect moment to intervene. He observed the subtle cues in the man's body language. The hand brushing against the concealed object, the flicker of eyes scanning the room, and the tightness in the jaw, all signals the veteran recognized instantly. He had been in situations where hesitation could cost lives, and he refused to allow that here. Yet he also knew the importance of subtlety. Any sudden movement could alert the man prematurely, potentially putting everyone in the restaurant at risk. He had to be deliberate, silent, and precise. The veteran slowly rose from his seat, pretending to stretch his legs. He kept his gaze fixed on the nervous man, moving in a way that did not draw attention. The restaurant seemed oblivious to the tension that he alone sensed. He walked casually, each step calculated, until he reached a position closer to the police chief's table without alarming anyone. He noticed how the chief's eyes briefly met his, an almost imperceptible glance that conveyed awareness. The veteran knew instinctively that the chief could sense the tension, even if he did not yet fully understand it. They were silently aligned, two trained minds preparing for a moment that could demand immediate action. The man shifted again, his hand twitching slightly as he adjusted the concealed object. The veteran's muscles tensed subtly, ready to spring into action. He whispered under his breath, a quiet mantra to maintain focus, and moved another step closer. His experience taught him that control was critical. Acting too soon could escalate the situation, but waiting too long could be disastrous. He had to wait for a clear signal, a subtle but unmistakable cue that action was necessary. The nervous man's attention returned to the police chief's table, his eyes narrowing with focus. The veteran noticed a slight movement in the object hidden under the jacket. It was enough to confirm his suspicion. The man intended to act, and the consequences could be deadly. The veteran knew there was no time for hesitation. He had to make his move while keeping the surrounding people safe. He adjusted his stance, ready to step in, ready to protect, but careful not to alarm anyone unnecessarily. He walked closer still, positioning himself just behind the nervous man. The veteran's eyes locked on the man's movements, analyzing every micro-expression, every subtle shift of weight. He could sense the rising tension, the almost imperceptible preparation for an act that could endanger multiple lives. His training kicked in fully, each movement purposeful, controlled, and precise. He was calm on the surface, but inside, he was prepared to react instantly. Then, he leaned in slightly, his voice low and steady, barely audible. He whispered the words that would signal the beginning of the intervention. "Don't talk." The police chief glanced at him, recognizing the urgency in the tone without needing further explanation. The veteran's experience had taught him the power of minimal communication, of conveying meaning without words, of using presence and posture to warn and guide. The chief nodded subtly, understanding completely. The veteran continued to observe the nervous man, who now appeared slightly unsettled by the calm but intense presence behind him. The veteran did not need to move quickly. His quiet confidence and readiness created a psychological barrier, slowing the man's actions. Every second mattered, and he used each one to maintain control. He stayed close, positioning himself between the potential threat and the chief, while keeping his movements subtle enough not to draw attention from the other patrons. The man shifted again, clearly frustrated by the invisible barrier the veteran represented. His hand moved more deliberately toward the concealed object, but the veteran was ready. Years of training had taught him to anticipate every possibility, to act decisively when the moment demanded. He remained calm, his mind mapping the environment, noting exits, potential obstacles, and the positions of the diners. Every detail counted. One wrong move could cause panic or harm. The police chief mirrored the veteran's awareness, his posture subtly aligning with the veteran's position. Though they had never met before, both men instinctively understood the importance of remaining composed and prepared. Their combined presence created a quiet but powerful deterrent, signaling to the nervous man that any action would be met immediately. The veteran's voice remained calm, quiet, almost hidden, reinforcing the unspoken instructions that the chief understood. The nervous man's eyes darted nervously around the room, searching for an opportunity or escape. The veteran observed every micro-movement, every twitch of the eyes, every shift in posture. He anticipated the man's next move before it even fully formed. He subtly adjusted his stance, preparing to intercept if necessary. The surrounding diners remained unaware, the quiet normalcy of the restaurant masking the tension that hung in the air. Then, without a word, the veteran moved just enough to create a physical barrier, positioning himself slightly between the man and the chief. The movement was subtle, controlled, yet unmistakable in its intent. The man hesitated, sensing resistance without fully understanding its source. The veteran's presence was enough to slow him down, to disrupt his plan. While still keeping the situation calm for the people around, the chief understood instantly, his eyes communicating silent acknowledgement. The veteran continued to monitor the nervous man, reading his intentions through tiny gestures and subtle shifts in posture. He did not need to shout or cause alarm. His presence alone was a warning. The nervous man's hand twitched again, but the veteran was ready, muscles coiled, mind sharp, prepared to act in the next heartbeat if necessary. Seconds stretched into a tense rhythm. The veteran remained composed, maintaining his position, balancing patience with readiness. Every movement he made was deliberate, calculated, and controlled. The nervous man's frustration grew, but the veteran's calm presence created a barrier of both physical and psychological control. He was ready for any sudden action, any unpredictable move. But he waited for the precise moment when intervention would be necessary. Finally, the man made a subtle, decisive movement, confirming the veteran's fears. Without hesitation, the veteran acted. His body moved with trained precision, intercepting the man before any harm could occur. The maneuver was quick but controlled, ensuring the safety of everyone nearby. The nervous man's attempt was neutralized, his plan thwarted before it could escalate into danger. The veteran's training and instincts had taken over, his calm and readiness turning what could have been chaos into a controlled intervention. The police chief reacted simultaneously, taking control of the situation alongside the veteran. Their coordinated awareness ensured that no bystanders were harmed, and the nervous man was subdued safely. The restaurant's normal hum continued, almost oblivious to the near crisis that had just unfolded. The veteran's quick thinking, quiet presence, and experience had prevented what could have been a dangerous and tragic event. As the situation stabilized, the veteran stepped back slightly, allowing the chief to manage the aftermath. He remained calm, blending back into the background, careful not to draw unnecessary attention. His role was clear, and he had fulfilled it without fanfare or recognition. The nervous man was now under control, and the safety of everyone in the restaurant was secured. The veteran's instincts, training, and quiet vigilance had made all the difference, turning a tense moment into a contained resolution. Afterward, the veteran took a deep breath, allowing the tension to leave his body slowly. He had acted precisely, deliberately, and effectively. His mind replayed the events, reviewing each movement, each decision, and each calculation. He had remained calm when others might have panicked, controlled when chaos threatened, and observant when most would have been blind to danger. The veteran knew that tonight, his experience had saved lives, including that of the police chief, without anyone realizing how close they had come to harm. He glanced around the restaurant, noting that life continued as usual. Families laughed, couples conversed, and servers moved between tables, all unaware of the silent storm that had just passed. The veteran felt a quiet satisfaction, not from recognition or praise, but from knowing that he had done what was necessary. He had protected others, fulfilled his duty, and returned the space to calm. And as he prepared to leave, he carried with him the quiet knowledge that his instincts and training had made a real difference tonight. The veteran's quick action had stopped the immediate threat, but the tension in the restaurant lingered. He remained calm, his body still alert, his eyes scanning the area for any further danger. The nervous man was now restrained, his plan completely thwarted, but the veteran knew better than to assume the danger was fully over. Years of training had taught him that even small oversights could have consequences. He subtly adjusted his stance, keeping a protective presence near the police chief, while allowing the chief to take charge of the situation. The police chief reacted with authority, instructing staff and bystanders calmly to remain seated and quiet. The veteran observed, noting how the chief's experience and composure matched his own. Together, they managed the situation efficiently, controlling the nervous man and ensuring no one else was endangered. The veteran's presence was almost invisible to the rest of the diners, yet it had been crucial in preventing a tragedy. He had intervened quietly, effectively, and without causing panic. And now he watched as the chief assessed the scene and coordinated with responding officers. Outside the restaurant, patrons began to notice something was different, but no one panicked. The staff moved efficiently, following the chief's instructions, and the veteran's calm demeanor helped maintain a sense of normalcy. He remained near the table, subtly guiding the chief's line of sight and ensuring that the nervous man could not act again. His mind remained active, considering every possible risk and keeping all scenarios in check. This was a skill developed over years, a combination of training and experience that allowed him to act decisively under pressure. The police chief approached the veteran, giving a subtle nod of appreciation. It was a quiet acknowledgement, unspoken but full of meaning. The veteran did not seek praise. He had acted because it was the right thing to do, because he could not ignore the signs that others might have missed. His focus remained on the safety of everyone in the restaurant. The nervous man was now fully under control, the potential danger neutralized, and the calm atmosphere gradually returned to the room as the veteran observed. He noticed the nervous man's demeanor change. Fear replaced determination in his eyes. The veteran had prevented harm without a struggle, demonstrating the quiet power of preparation, awareness, and swift, controlled action. He had acted decisively at the right moment, and the result was clear. No one was injured, and a potential tragedy had been averted. The other diners were beginning to resume their meals, still unaware of how close they had come to danger. The police chief spoke quietly with the veteran, acknowledging the vital role he had played. Even though words were few, the respect and understanding were unmistakable. The veteran remained humble, simply observing and ensuring that the nervous man remained restrained. He had no desire for recognition. The act itself, the knowledge that lives had been protected, was enough. His child waiting at home, and the responsibility of protecting others, drove him more than any praise ever could. Emergency responders arrived shortly after, taking control and securing the area. The veteran stepped back, allowing the chief and officers to handle the formalities. His role had been to prevent immediate harm, and he had done so with precision and calm. He observed quietly, ensuring that everyone remained safe as the nervous man was escorted out. Patrons began to understand that something serious had happened, but the veteran's composed presence had kept the situation under control and prevented panic. The veteran thought about the contrast between the normalcy of the restaurant and the near crisis that had unfolded. Families were still eating, children laughing, couples talking softly, all seemingly unaware of how close danger had come. He understood the power of calm action, the importance of preparation, and the responsibility that came with the skills he had developed. He remained vigilant until he was certain there were no lingering threats. Once the nervous man was fully in the custody of authorities, the veteran finally allowed himself a moment to relax. His body uncoiled slightly, and his mind slowly shifted from intense alertness to reflection. He had intervened, prevented potential harm, and done so without causing unnecessary alarm. It was a demonstration of experience, instinct, and courage, quietly executed without fanfare. The chief gave a final nod, acknowledging the veteran's critical role in the outcome. The unspoken respect between them was profound, a shared understanding that had been forged in moments of tension. The veteran thought about what had happened, and how quickly life could change in an instant. A quiet dinner could have turned into chaos, but his awareness and decisive action had kept everyone safe. He understood that heroism did not always come with recognition. Sometimes it was the quiet, prepared individual who prevented tragedy before anyone even realized it was about to happen. That knowledge was its own reward. He had acted instinctively, guided by experience, and it had made a real difference. He returned to his seat briefly, finishing the remainder of his meal as calmly as possible. The restaurant's atmosphere gradually returned to normal, the ordinary sounds masking the extraordinary events that had just unfolded. Patrons began to engage in conversations again, oblivious to the silent intervention that had saved lives. The veteran remained composed, watching quietly, aware of every movement, but no longer in immediate danger. He allowed himself a brief smile, knowing that he had done what was necessary without drawing attention. The police chief approached one final time, quietly thanking the veteran. The words were simple, but their weight was significant. The veteran nodded, acknowledging the respect without dwelling on it. He had acted out of duty, instinct, and responsibility, not for praise. His mind was already shifting to thoughts of returning home, to the life that awaited him and the child who depended on him. He had fulfilled his role tonight, and he could now step away with quiet satisfaction. As the veteran left the steakhouse, he reflected on the events of the evening. He had observed, decided, and acted, turning what could have been a dangerous situation into a controlled resolution. His experience and training had guided him, but it was his calmness, awareness, and ability to act without hesitation that had truly made the difference. He knew that in life, ordinary moments could suddenly become extraordinary, and preparation could mean the difference between safety and harm. Tonight, he had ensured the safety of many, including the police chief, without anyone realizing the quiet heroism that had taken place. The veteran walked out of the steakhouse, into the cool night air, taking a deep breath that seemed to release weeks of tension. His body was tired, his mind still alert, replaying every detail of the evening. He had acted when it mattered most, preventing what could have been a tragedy, but now the world felt quieter, calmer, and oddly more ordinary. He walked slowly to his car, reflecting on the events that had just unfolded. Even in victory, he could not ignore the weight of responsibility that had been resting on his shoulders the entire time. The police chief had given him a nod of respect, a silent acknowledgement that carried more weight than words ever could. He understood without needing explanation how critical the veteran's intervention had been. The nervous man had been restrained, lives had been protected, and the restaurant was safe again, all without unnecessary panic. The veteran had acted quickly, silently, and effectively. There was no applause, no cameras, no recognition beyond that quiet nod. And that was exactly how he wanted it. He did not act for attention or praise. He had acted because it was the right thing to do. As he settled into the driver's seat, the veteran allowed himself to reflect more deeply. He thought about the training, the years of discipline, and the countless small moments that had built his instincts. Those lessons, learned under pressure and through experience, had prepared him for a moment like this. He had learned to observe, decide, and act, all without hesitation. And tonight, that training had made a tangible difference. It was a reminder of why he had carried those skills, why he had dedicated years to service, and why he remained vigilant even in moments of quiet. Driving home, he thought about his child, waiting for him with an innocent expectation of safety and love. The evening's events had reinforced why he stayed alert, why he could never truly switch off the protective instincts that had been drilled into him for years. Being a parent and a veteran was not just about physical preparedness. It was about awareness, judgment, and the quiet confidence to act decisively when necessary. He smiled faintly at the thought of his child, realizing that what he had done tonight was as much about ensuring a world worth returning to as it was about the immediate safety of others. The streets were calm, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement from an earlier drizzle. The veteran felt the normality of the world around him, yet the memory of the tense moments inside the steakhouse lingered. He replayed the subtle cues, the nervous movements of the man, the instinctive gestures that told him something was amiss. He had responded calmly, deliberately, and without hesitation. It was a quiet victory, one that might never be acknowledged publicly, but it mattered all the same. Lives had been protected, and for him, that was enough. As he parked outside his home, he took another moment to prepare himself for the return to normal life. The weight of responsibility remained, but it was tempered by the satisfaction of knowing that he had done what was needed. He stepped inside, greeted by the familiar sounds of home, the laughter of his child, and the comforting routine that made the world feel safe again. It was a stark contrast to the tension of earlier, but it reminded him why he had acted so decisively. Protecting others, whether in a restaurant or in the world at large, was an extension of the love he held for his child and the values he carried from his years of service. Sitting down at the kitchen table, he finally allowed himself a moment of rest. His child approached, full of questions and curiosity, unaware of the night's extraordinary events. The veteran smiled and engaged, answering questions, sharing small stories, and keeping the tone light. In his own way, he was teaching the same lessons he had lived: awareness, patience, calmness, and courage. Even in ordinary life, those lessons mattered. He had acted as a protector today, and now he could act as a parent, blending both roles seamlessly. He reflected quietly on the police chief and the subtle bond formed in the heat of a critical moment. Even strangers could connect deeply when circumstances demanded it, understanding each other's decisions and instincts without words. That silent respect, earned through action and awareness, was a rare and profound acknowledgement. It reinforced the veteran's belief that sometimes the most meaningful recognition was unspoken, found in shared understanding rather than public attention. The veteran considered how quickly life could change, how a peaceful evening could shift in an instant. One moment, he had been enjoying a simple dinner, and the next, he was confronting a potential threat, relying solely on training, instinct, and calmness. It was a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of being prepared, aware, and willing to act without hesitation. He felt gratitude for his experience, for the discipline it had instilled, and for the quiet strength it had given him in moments of crisis. As night deepened, the veteran tucked his child into bed, ensuring comfort and safety. The ordinary bedtime routine was infused with a sense of peace that only came from knowing the world was temporarily safe, that a crisis had been averted, and that he had played a part in that outcome. He lingered for a moment, observing his child sleeping peacefully, and felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. His actions had protected innocence, preserved safety, and reinforced the value of vigilance, courage, and responsibility. Finally, he sat in the living room, reflecting on the full arc of the evening. From the initial observation of subtle signs in the restaurant to the decisive intervention that prevented potential harm, every step had relied on his experience and calm judgment. He thought about the quiet power of preparation, the importance of awareness, and the significance of timing. The night had been a testament to how ordinary people, guided by instinct, training, and values, could make extraordinary differences without fanfare or recognition. He allowed himself a final deep breath, feeling the tension of the night dissolve into the calm of home. The world outside continued as usual, unaware of the quiet heroism that had occurred. Yet for the veteran, the knowledge of what had happened was enough. He had observed, decided, and acted when it mattered most. He had protected lives, ensured safety, and returned home to the life that truly mattered. The silent pride he felt was profound, rooted not in recognition, but in the certainty that he had done what was right, what was necessary, and what would ensure the safety and peace of others. The veteran knew that life would continue, with ordinary moments punctuated by extraordinary circumstances. He was prepared for both, guided by awareness, experience, and the quiet responsibility that came from knowing he could act when needed. Tonight, he had fulfilled that duty, and as he finally settled into the calm of home, he felt the quiet satisfaction of a mission completed, lives preserved, and the knowledge that courage, vigilance, and instinct could quietly change the course of events. And as he looked around at his home, at the life he protected and nurtured, he felt that all the preparation, all the training, and all the quiet moments of observation had been worth it. Tonight, he had truly made a difference.